Welcome to another episode of That 60s Recording Podcast, the podcast that has conversations inspired by the golden era of recording. Before we begin, I'd like to just tell you again about this new venture that I have going called Mojo Cables, which is an boutique instrument cable company that I've started with my good friend Matthew Uller, aka Matty, who is a electrical engineer and a guitarist, and me being a studio owner, we decided that it would be kind of fun to get together and solder some cables. So we did a heck of a lot of research into capacitance and cable lengths and all the jazz and components, and we decided to start this cable company. So we've got some beautiful Van Dam cables, some lovely Rian connectors that are all hand soldered, silicon sealed, and then with heat shrink wrapped around. So they are as sturdy as you are going to get. We are extremely proud of them. And we are also donating £1 of the sale of every cable to the charity Mind, which is an extremely important charity for who are doing great things in mental health. So yeah, you can go and check out more about Mojo Cables at mojocables.com. We're also on Instagram at Mojo Cables. Okay, and on to the episode. This episode is a conversation with Alex Bennett, who is a Melbourne-based studio owner, engineer, producer. There's been a bit of a trend of Australians that I've been speaking to recently, and I've really enjoyed it, getting to know a music scene that I didn't really know much about, and speaking to a group of people who I hadn't been aware of before. So yeah, it's been really, really enjoyable making these episodes. Alex runs a fully analog studio, which it's so inspiring. He genuinely has not a single screen at his studio, and it's it's brilliant. And he's a young guy who's sort of grown up in the digital world and then gone really deep into analog, essentially. So this is a really interesting conversation, and he's so knowledgeable. He knows a huge amount about all of this stuff, and there's definitely one that you need your notepad for. He gives lots of little bits of advice and things that you can try. There's tons of things I'm going to try after this conversation. So yeah, go and do that. Here we go. Alex Bennett of Sound Recording. If you could sort of tell everybody about where you're located and what it is that you do, if you can describe it in a sort of a few words, how would you describe how you make your living?
Okay. Well, I'm located on Dja Dja Wurrung country, which is also known as Castlemaine. Okay. Which is about an hour and a half from Naarm or Melbourne in Australia. I run a recording studio called Sound Recordings, and it is a 100% analog recording facility.
Nice. Yeah. I obviously I was following you on Instagram, so just to let everybody know, they will have heard this by this time already. So my conversation with Liam Goff, and that's how our sort of link up happened. But it turns out I was already following you on Instagram. You were one of the people that was there. And it's it's beautiful. Your studio looks like such a cool place to be. You've got some really choice gear, and the way that you, it's, you're not just putting pictures on there for the sake of pictures. Everything's got a real bit of value to it. And I really enjoyed scrolling down it and reading all your stuff.
I'm glad you think that, because I have such a love-hate relationship with Instagram, and I consider it a necessary evil. So when I post, I try to make it count.
What was your journey into sort of where you are now? I always find it quite interesting. So you've kind of landed as an all analog studio. How how did that begin? Because you don't seem old enough to have worked on analog to begin with.
continue to surprise people, I think. People often arrive at the studio and go, whoa, really thought you were going to be a 60-year-old person. No, I started sound recording like most people in, I'll say our generation, I'm assuming.
Yes.
But in the digital land, I did an undergraduate degree in music technology at a conservatorium of music. So it was a music degree plus a technology, sound engineering degree. But after that, I kind of really fell out of love with it because I realized I didn't really love computers at all. In fact, I despise them and I can't work with them. I don't know how to fix them. So I ended up doing postgraduate study in composition. But I ended up over in Auckland in New Zealand. And I was studying composition there, but I landed a job at the university in the music school doing the technician work.
Okay.
So I was maintaining the recording studios, loaning out keys to students, fixing the studios, upgrading them, lending gear out, all that kind of stuff. And it was during that time in that job that I had access to the basement at the University of Auckland, which I found all the tape recorders in.
Oh, wow.
That were there from the electronic music studios in the 70s and the 80s. And I was basically tasked with a job to dispose of gear.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes. Like at the end of a year, if we had to reshuffle storerooms and things, and we would come up with piles of stuff that either needed to be fixed or it was broken. And I would get a quote for what something might cost to repair or service by somebody qualified, and the quote would come back and then the university would say, no, we don't want it. Can you just get rid of it?
Wow.
So I actually inherited a tape recorder out of that.
Incredible.
That used to be used at the university that they really just didn't want it because they needed to get a brand new like Pro Tools rig or whatever for another studio.
Mm-hmm.
And it was never part of the syllabus to learn tape recording or tape splicing or whatever. So they just had no want for it anymore. So that's how I got my hands on my first tape recorder.
So were you interested in that kind of side of things at that time? What was your kind of mentality? Well, were you a composer?
Yeah, in a sense. At the time I was building instruments. I was kind of doing electronic composition.
Okay.
Like electroacoustic music. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's like creating music with sound for loudspeakers, which is the university buzz. It's pretty popular in England.
Yeah.
It was cool at the time. But I was leading this other life where I was in a couple of bands and I would, on the weekends, frequent gigs and stuff. So outside of university, I hung out with people in bands. So it was at that point that I started recording bands again on this. It was an Otari 1/2-inch 8-track.
Nice.
Like an MX 5050, that one. So it was really easy to wheel around and take to people's houses, easy to take to practice rooms, or in various spaces throughout the university where there was, space to record music. So I kind of ended up becoming like a mobile 8-track recording studio. So I would set up wherever I needed to be and do recordings for friends, basically for free at that point.
And were they conscious? The people that you were recording, was there any appeal in it being to tape, or was it just that happened to be the medium you were working on?
A little bit of both, I guess. I think there was always appeal. I was playing lots of garage punk music at the time and hanging out with lots of punks, and of course, tape lends itself to that kind of genre fairly easily. And a lot of people love the simplicity of 8 tracks, and a lot was achievable on that format. So yeah, I think the technology lent itself to it. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, if I listen to those recordings now, they're pretty trashy, but I guess that comes part and parcel with some types of musics. So yeah, it did lend itself to that. Yeah.
Were you kind of learning as you went, or did you I'm kind of picturing you with this new 8-track that you'd sort of inherited off the uni, and you're plugging it in. Are you just sort of learning as you go, or what experience?
100%. It was nothing like recording with a computer, at least. When I first started, I was treating it that way, and excuse me. Yeah, the learning curve was steep, and I was doing it on my own, and using the internet. There were a few old school teachers in the composition department who were working with those machines in the 70s and 80s, making electronic music. Recording synthesizers and tones and splicing them, and so I learned how to splice tape from one of the old composition teachers there. That was handy. But in terms of actually calibrating the machine and aligning it, I had no idea. So I started using it as it came out of the basement, which it worked surprisingly well in hindsight. It would have been in storage for at least 10 years, if not 15.
Wow.
And the Otari, so hats off to the Otari engineers. It worked pretty well after not having anything done to it. However, over about, I guess, a 2 or 3 year kind of window, I eventually learned how to line the machine up. And even to this day, I get better and better at doing that every time. There's still a lot of things that I look back on and go, wow, is that really how I did it back then? That is wild. But yeah, the learning curve for somebody my age for learning how to calibrate a tape machine is something completely other world. It's from another world, to using a computer.
It totally is, completely.
Yeah.
So then what happened from, presumably you finished uni and you still had your Atari. What's happening? What's happening from there?
Yeah, well, lots, I guess, a lot more purchasing happened. I sold a car that I owned that was still in Australia while I was in New Zealand, and that I sold that at a pretty good time, and I turned that money into tape recorders and microphones.
Love it.
I ordered. I came across 2 Ampex 300 decks that used to be in Capitol Recording Studios.
Oh, cool.
Just on eBay, there was a set of them, and they were very cheap, but I knew that there'd be work involved. But it was at a bizarre time where, oh God, what year was it? I guess it would have been around 2010 or something, and the dollar was really great, and it was kind of somehow really cheap to get stuff from America.
Oh, cool.
So I got to, giant. They were in cases that were as big as, washing machines. You know what the Ampex 300 looks like?
Yeah.
Ampex 350, Ampex 351, big silver faced recording decks that were all over America in the 50s and 60s. So at that time, I was obsessed with 50s rock and roll and 1960s recordings.
Nice. Oh, cool.
So I just wanted to get to the source and get an Ampex because that's what Phil Spector was using. That's what the Beach Boys records were made on. That's what 2/3 of the Blue Note records were made on. So I was just obsessed with American recordings from the 50s and 60s. So I got 2 Ampex machines with the hope of maybe turning them into a 4-track, but then that became something I couldn't achieve with the technology that came with them.
Yeah.
So I ended up just using them both as 2-track recorders, and made a few records that were live to 2-track. I made a few records that were live to 2-track and then bouncing over, adding stuff to the next layer. So really doing it in an old 50s way for sure. Yeah, and from there it just kind of spiraled out of control with tape recorders. But I did move back to Australia around then, and then got a 1/2-inch 4-track Ampex, then I got a 1-inch 8-track MCI, and now I have a 2-inch 16-track MCI as well. So I've got 16, 8, 4, 2, 1.
The whole gang.
The whole gang.
How I'm always really enjoy. So starting on 8-track is a bit unusual, it seems. Most people seem to have started. Obviously, I talked to a lot of engineers who were older, and they, just because they were around, they would start on 2-track or 4-track, and then it would expand from there. So you started on 8-track and then almost regressed back to 2-track.
Yeah,
and spent a bit of time there.
I did. I do liken my journey to somebody from the 50s, except that I started on the 8-track, but that was kind of the stepping stone from computer land to limiting the options at least somewhat to 8. But then because of the music I was in love with at the time, I decided, and the sound, like, the distortions that you hear in 50s and 60s rock and roll, I wanted that. I wanted those harmonics and those kind of room sounds at the time. I wanted to make Little Richard records,
fantastic.
But with trashy Auckland garage bands, which I guess that came close maybe a few times, but but then from there it's like I went all the way back to 2, and some of the mixes ended up being mono, so I started off there, and then I kind of earned every track count from there because I got them in that order. I then got the 4-track Ampex 440, which is like a 1969 recorder. So then it was like, 4-track Muscle Shoals vibes.
Yes.
And then I got the 1-inch 8-track and exploded back into 8-track land, but it was full fidelity, like, the beginning of the 70s. And I've only just opened up the world of 16-track with the 2-inch machine.
How are you finding it?
Awesome, except the mix downs are a head fuck. Sorry.
No, of course you can. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So as you know, like mixing down an 8-track record takes enough people. It takes 2 people sometimes with both hands on the desk to get a complicated 8-track mix just right. And obviously, I'm always mixing to tape, so we're mixing down to the 2-track machine. And it's a performance unto itself. I'm sure you understand.
Yeah.
So 8 tracks was complicated enough for people and myself. And then as soon as I got 16, it just absolutely more than doubles the amount of things you have to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
Obviously the textures and the complexity of the image you can create from 16 tracks is amazing at that headroom with that amount of tape. It's great, but I do often really enjoy now when people want to use the 8-track because it's so much simpler and in some ways better, but it's down to the band, really.
Of course. How are you finding your people's reaction? So obviously I feel like this is a movement that's really happening. It's traveling fast now, and you were clearly quite early to it. I'm talking about in our generation of,
Yeah, I agree. I know that what you're talking about, and I'll interrupt and say I'm really lucky that I purchased all the tape recorders and most of my equipment like 10 years ago, or going on that long, because now it's definitely not. We're not in the trough. We're in the peak of the popularity. So
sure.
But go on. What was your question?
Well, so I mean, bands' reactions. I mean, I remember recording with, when I was doing original projects and, going to be a rock star kind of phase. It was none, it wasn't to tape. It was all to Pro Tools and Logic. How have you found bands' reactions as you've kind of gathered momentum, and what are they asking of you, and what are they surprised about, and how do they enjoy the process?
Okay. Well, firstly, most people don't call me up unless they want to use tape recorders. I think most people don't contact me accidentally thinking I've got computers. So I'm not normally in the business of convincing people to use tape, which is great because I don't want to have anything to do with computers. So most people always have an expectation that it's going to be great, you know, when they arrive. But yeah, on the whole, people have an awesome time. And I would say 95% of people come out of the project going, that was easier than any other recording session that I've ever done. And I don't think that that's because of me or anything I've done, other than facilitate the session in the sense that the technology works.
Yeah.
But what I love about using tape recorders is that it's just normalizing musicians' ability to make decisions on the spot. Like, normalize making decisions again is my new motto. Like, you know, when you're in computer land, you can do 50 takes of one vocal track and then like chop it up later to make it perfect, which is fine. Great. I don't want to have anything to do with that. And it kind of destroys the person putting that together, you know, the artist. Really, really. I mean, I can't speak for everyone. Some people probably love that. But yeah, I do love the way that tape recording preserves the performance, at least a great chunk of it. Like that said, the MCI decks that I have now have really awesome punch in and punch out capabilities. So when it does roll around to the main vocal take, we do drop in on that shit and get it right. If the singer wants to do it line by line and then fix one word, we can. You know, that's the equivalent of the Pro Tools chopper. But ultimately, we'll start with a take from start to finish.
Yes.
For any overdub, and 98% of it is there. So, yeah.
If you've got someone who's come in, perhaps, you know, a band who's not worked in that sort of decision-making headspace before, do you find that there's a sort of period of having to adapt and learn how that sort of feels?
Totally. And that's like most people, you know, will come into this studio and have not worked on this technology before. But I just let people know that it's fundamentally no different to any recording situation you've ever been in before, other than we can't shift things in the time domain, not individually anyway. So, but I say to people who are worried, I just say, well, I ask, do you practice? Yes, we practice. Okay, good. Do you play gigs? Well, this is going to sound funny now given the world we're in, but yes, most bands play gigs. And I'm like, well, you know, just play it like you're at a gig or play it like you're at a practice and we'll go from there. That's really all it is. And if you can't play together in a rehearsal room and if you can't do a gig, then you're probably not ready.
Yeah.
You know, that said, I still never turn anybody away. As far as I'm concerned, if you want to record, then you're ready-ish, and we'll get there. We'll get something, you know. Yeah. But yeah, the people who are most worried generally come out of it feeling really great, because of the decision making on the fly, and I guess there is an immediacy. There's a certain immediacy that I'm able to create with the sounds. I think anyway that it does sound very good straight away. And I guess, I mean, look, part of that's microphones and technology and the room and whatever, but it's also just, I approach recordings from, you know, I don't start recording until it really sounds 95% as it's going to be on the record. You know, I'm not leaving the not leaving anything up to chance for the mix,
Yes, yeah.
Again, that's like a 21st century habit of we'll fix it later. We'll make it sound good later. I don't start recording until it already sounds good. So the band come in for the first listen and go, oh, wow, great. Then we'll start. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that exactly. I think that that's a really important way to approach. That doesn't seem to... it seems to be like we've said, gathering momentum, and it's the way I record. I'm doing mainly drum sessions, and although I'm not recording fully analog because I'm sending a lot of tracks over the internet.
That's a different world, yeah.
Yeah, it is. But then I will still, I'm learning to play on a song. It's playing the song as many times as it needs to be until the part's there, and then when it gets to performance time, recording time, I maybe do maximum 3 takes, and one of those takes will be the one. And it's and if it happens to be the first one, then I'm not going to do 2 more. I'm just going to do it until it's done.
There's that too, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a similar mentality, and I think it's one that can be brought. Not everybody's recording in the way that you are, but it's definitely a mentality that can be brought to sort of any setup, any recording setup for sure.
Oh, it can, and I think that people have taken that away with them sometimes as well. Because I do see people. I do have regular return people and regular customers, and I feel like over the time, some people's opinions and practices have changed as a result of coming here, which I think is a great thing,
Absolutely.
Because you can make decisions and you can deliberately limit your tools if you're using a digital system. You just need to have the discipline.
Yes.
But here the discipline is imposed by the limitations of the technologies.
Do you rent a space? Is it in your house, or what's the actual building like?
It is on my property. The studio is separate from the house. It's in a stone building out the back with it's kind of like a shed.
Yeah.
I do admire. I'm thankful that you said you really like the space, but if you could be here in person, it's it's dusty and it's got cobwebs everywhere, and it's not like a studio in the city. And but I think that's what people like as well.
Yeah, it's characterful, and
stone building, and the mortar falls off everywhere, and it's
amazing.
It has character. But it's a vibe in there that's not like a sterile environment that you might come across in a studio city, and it has natural light. I've got windows.
Oh, fantastic!
So, but you can hear things outside sometimes. But your question was, is it for hire, the space? Sometimes. So generally when you come here, you come and you work with me. That said, on occasion, sometimes someone will come for an extended period of time with an engineer who may be someone I know or it may not be, and it's generally a case-by-case basis. But on some occasions, somebody's come with an engineer who's brought a laptop and an interface, and they do their thing. I help them get set up in the space and provide them with microphones and line ins and line outs and microphone preamps. But if they want to record to tape, computer, that'll be when I bow out and they do their thing. So that happens sometimes. But these days I've been, outside of lockdowns, busy enough with people who want to use the machines. And if that's the case, then it's generally me, because and it's, unless there's some 60-year-old engineer coming in for an outside session that knows how to use those machines intimately, I'm not going to just bow out and let someone else use the machines.
Of course basically. Not,
yeah. But that's only because I tech them myself. So I'm constantly monitoring the machines for performance and making adjustments in every session on the fly. So, so that's the space and kind of hiring model setups.
How did you go? I mean, is it stone on the inside or is it plastic? It's not. It is.
No, it's sedimentary rock from around the area, so it looks the part.
So how did you go about tempering it? I mean, what's the acoustic like inside the space?
I've done nothing.
I love it.
My dad built the building when I was a kid for a car garage. He's a vintage car enthusiast. So when I was a kid, it was his garage. It was full of English cars, believe it or not.
Amazing.
So he just built it. And the gable, there's timber gable ceiling that came from an old plaster factory in town that was being demolished, that he bought the roofing structure.
Okay.
So the roof line is of the era, at least of the Victorian gold mining era here. And the stones are from around the bush, back when you could steal stones from the bush to build a building. You can't do it now because there's none left. But yeah, so when I moved back here to start a studio, I was considering using a different part of the property for the studio. But then because I moved back here after living in New Zealand, so I'm living in my childhood home now. And I'm raising a child here, so that's a whole nother thing. So I've come full circle, and I was originally going to use different parts of the property for the studio until I went into this stone garage, and I was, clapped my hands in there and went, "Whoa, no, this should be it sounded awesome. It just straight up sounded great, and I knew a drum kit would sound sick in there."
Yeah.
So I honestly have not done anything to that room, other than put up a little bit of absorption against one face of the walls where all the amplifiers are currently now. So there's just some insulation on the wall and some wooden panels that are staggered a little bit for absorption and a little bit of extra diffusion. But the infinitely variable surfaces of the stone is just phenomenal, and it creates a really nice diffusion in there. And the walls are about this thick.
Wow, nice.
For those listening, it's about a foot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I always forget that it's a podcast, even though it's my podcast.
Yeah. So imagine that the stone wall is about 30 centimeters or 12 inches thick. So it absorbs a lot of low frequencies, and it keeps a lot of noise out. And I've built some big, silly double wooden doors on the inside and outside of the main entrance that are by no means acoustically designed. I'm a real hack in that kind of sense. Although I did put a little bit more energy into the control room, which we built out from the original stone structure.
Okay.
That has a double stud wall. So it's got two walls basically. And it's fairly well insulated. So you really can't hear much in there of the outside world, and it's got two panes of glass in the window. And but again, the acoustic treatment, I did no measurements. I just put stuff up around and made it look random enough that it would, sound like it would be doing the job. And I mix as quiet as I can with the door open.
Yeah. You're speaking my language now. I like these words.
Yeah. I have always fantasized about, Studio Mark III would be, I'll put a little bit more energy and effort into the mathematics. But that's the next project.
Yeah.
And now this one, it does just fine. And, everything gets mastered somewhere else. So if the mix is done quietly and carefully, it tends to transport really well.
No, cool. I mean, want to get into some of the nitty gritty of sort of your recording processes. I mean, the first place my mind jumps to is some lovely pictures. I think they're quite a few years ago now of you miking up a drum kit and with mono overhead. I don't even think there was a kick mic on it, but there may well have been. It might not have been in shot. And then a microphone behind the player's seat. And I love that. And, they clearly, I'm not sure what mic it was. Do you have RCA mic down there? Or
I do.
Yeah, some nice big ribbons or tubes that you have.
Yeah. There's no one set way I do it for every session. I don't know if you know what session that one was,
I
or it was
can't
just
remember.
you saw. You weren't thinking of the album.
No, it was just a picture I saw that sort of caught my attention. Yeah.
I generally, like, general rule of thumb has always been less is more for me. So, but look, ultimately my setup for each session always comes down to what the band want to create. So I always ask them for a reference album. You know, I'll ask with relation to this project, what are your two favorite records? What are we aiming for? Because I don't want to impose my less is more on a project that is obviously one that requires more. So first and foremost, it comes down to genre. But I love to use as few microphones on a drum kit as possible and then fill out the sound from there if people are still wanting more detail or more clarity of a given element. So, yeah, I will often start with a single overhead or do a classic, you know, a Glyn Johns-esque setup where there's two microphones capturing pretty much all of it.
Yeah.
And then you'll probably want a kick mic and you might want a snare. And then if the toms still need to be a bit more hectic, we'll stick more mics on the toms, whatever. So I generally start thin and get thick. Yes. You know what I mean? Yeah. But as for mic choice, it always then comes down to the instrument, you know, the instrument and genre, you know. If I'm using a ribbon overhead in any of those photos, it's probably because the player has got really bright cymbals or they're just smashing them, or like I need it to be darker.
Yeah.
Or maybe they might have wanted a 50s, 60s American sound. And, you know, well, then obviously we'll use ribbons because that's all they used until later on. So, yeah, I couldn't give you one answer for the drum setup.
Yeah. I think that's cool. I like that approach of starting small and getting bigger as necessary. I mean, presumably, you know, if it's you, depending on obviously the genre of the project, but then if it's you mixing it, then you know what's going to be required as the mixer. And one of the things I not struggle with necessarily, but I have to bear in mind from when I'm doing my drum recording is I don't know often who's mixing it. You know, I might be working with the artist directly or a producer who's then going to forward it onto a mix engineer. And, you know, so there needs to be plenty of options, but same as you, you know, often when I do my rough mixes to send to the artist to work with, it's, you know, the 3-4 microphones and they always gush over the mix, which is really nice. But, and I think it probably surprises them when they find out how minimal it actually is.
Well, it probably just suggests that you've captured it well, you know, and you absolutely can capture a drum kit well with 4 channels. You can capture it equally as well with 2 channels. But as you know, the ability to then fit it into a mix of a recording that already exists becomes problematic. You need more elements to tweak. More channels is easier in a sense for something complex that already exists. But in my world, it's the other way around. It's back to front. It's like I will always mic up the drum kit first, and the band is there. They're all there with me. And from the first microphone I put up, I'll be having them come into the control room and listen to that. And then I look at them and go, where to from here? You know, so I actually don't. I try to make as little creative decisions as possible. I try to leave every decision up to the band from the get-go. So I will have already had a discussion with whoever's in charge of the project. There's almost always somebody in charge of the production in a band, and I let them steer the ship creatively, and I try to just facilitate the sound for them. So I will have already had some idea of how many microphones I'm going to put up that day on the drum kit based on what they've sent me. We'll also be limited by the tape recorder that we're using. So again, back to the original discussions about genre, you know, do they want to make a record that is like a 1974 record, or do they actually want to make a record that's 1969? Mm-hmm. And so that'll be the decision as to whether we're using 16 tracks or 8. And if we're using 8, then we're probably bussing the drums down to 2 tracks, maybe 3 if it's a power trio. But if it's not a power trio, then you're probably going to only have 2 tracks of drums, maybe even 1. So it depends. Do you want stereo drums or do you want mono drums? Because some people want to make like like heaps of overdubs on an 8-track album, but they still want it to be 8 tracks. So we'll just have 1 track of drums. But that could mean 4 or 5 mics.
Yes.
Down to 1 track. Mm-hmm. Or it could mean 1 mic onto 1 track, which, as you know, is a completely different sound.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's interesting. I love the way that you put that about you facilitating what the sort of artist wants, because it might not be that they necessarily know in sort of your world, your recording world, what is required specifically to get the sound that they're after, but they know that they can communicate that sound to you, and you're open enough and receptive enough to hear what they want and go, this is how you do that.
Yeah.
Enjoy that.
Like, they can definitely tell me which album is their favorite, and chances are I know it, or I'll make the effort to listen to it, or maybe even get it. Like, running the studio has become a reason for me to collect more records. Yeah. So I'll often purchase a record that I don't own purely for the fact that I need to hear it.
Of course you do, yeah.
To, for my professional development.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
Been rolling that into my tax returns every year, professional development fund. But yeah, it's if I'm not nailing the record that they were imagining in their mind for their own one, then I'm not doing my job properly. So, and I think that most bands know how they want to sound. They do, and they don't need an engineer or a producer who's going to change that.
So there we have it, the first half of my conversation with Alex Bennett of Sound Recordings. You can check his studio out on Instagram, which is at Sound Recordings. There's some beautiful pictures up there of his studio, and I'm just looking at it now as I speak to you. You can see there's tons of brickwork and some beautiful rugs. I mean, every studio has got to have beautiful rugs. As I've joked about with quite a lot of people on my Instagram. But yeah, go and look at some of the pictures. It's a really pretty space, and will give you a good insight as to what we've discussed. So yeah, the second part of that will be coming up next week. If you'd like to support this podcast by buying a mug, you can do that at my website, allyouneedisdrums.com. There is a link to the shop there. Thank you to everybody that has bought one already. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you can also do that through the website, or my email address is joe@allyouneedisdrums.com. Yes, that's it. So I'd just like to say a huge thank you to Rory Hancock for editing and uploading this podcast, to Joe Kane for the intro and outro music, and to David Henshaw for the artwork he supplies every episode. And you guys have a fantastic week, and I will be back next Tuesday with the second half of this episode. Goodbye!